Pope Leo XIV had not slept, and at first light he stood alone at the window of his study, where a pope is not meant to stand alone, and looked down into the courtyard. He had sent his secretary away. He wanted no one beside him for this. For 3 mornings he had come to this same glass at the same grey hour, and for 3 mornings he had watched the same thing happen below him, and on this 4th morning he had decided he could no longer keep calling it nothing. In the inner courtyard of the Apostolic Palace, a car the color of dried blood sat idling, and it had never once been driven in the rain. $500,000 of hand-stitched leather and armored glass, a black Maybach so quiet that the pigeons on the cornice did not lift their heads. The Pope knew whose it was. He had asked days earlier and been told, and the knowing had sat in him ever since like a swallowed stone. He watched Cardinal Aldo Breviglieri cross the stones toward it in full red, unhurried, and run one gloved finger along the door seam the way a man touches something he has convinced himself he has earned. What the Pope could not see, 4 floors above, was the envelope lying on the passenger seat of that car. Thin, grey, franked from a parish so poor it had used a stamp 2 cents short of the postage, so that it had traveled the last leg only because a sorting clerk in Rome had decided, on his own small authority, not to send it back. The Cardinal moved it aside with 2 fingers, the way one moves a dead leaf without reading the name signed at the bottom. It was a name he had not spoken aloud in 40 years. It was, although he would have denied it under oath, in front of witnesses, before God, the only name that had ever truly belonged to him before the Church gave him a grander one to wear. Inside that envelope, in the careful looping hand of a woman who had taught 3,000 orphans to hold a pencil, were 4 lines begging for a fraction of what the seat beneath him had cost. The Cardinal had already answered them. He had reached for the stamp the day before and pressed it once, slightly crooked, the way a thing is stamped by a man already thinking about lunch. Fondi non disponibili. Funds unavailable. Up at the glass, the Pope watched the black car pull away through the gate and felt the stone in him turn over. He did not yet know the woman's name. He did not yet understand that for 3 mornings he had been looking, without knowing it, at the precise machinery of a child's death. He would know all of it before noon. And what Pope Leo XIV would do with that car, and with the $500,000 sleeping inside its registration, before the sun set over this same courtyard that evening, would leave a kneeling man weeping on a concrete floor 1,000 kilometers away, in a room that smelled of disinfectant and rain. And it would leave the rest of the world in tears for an entirely different reason. The numbers, when they were finally laid side by side on a single desk, did not need a sermon. They were the sermon. On one side, $500,000, approved in a single afternoon, justified in a single sentence. The maintenance of prestige and diplomatic standing. Cardinal Breviglieri had written those exact words in the margin of the procurement file, in the green ink he reserved for documents he considered beneath the dignity of black. On the other side, 400 kilometers and 1 indifferent border away, a request for 11,000 euros. Not for a building. Not for a salary. Not for the woman who would sign it. for an oxygen concentrator, for a medical refrigerator that could hold insulin and vaccines at the 4 degrees that keep them from turning to poison, and for 3 months of rice and powdered milk for a clinic that put 91 children to sleep each night under a roof of corrugated tin held down in 2 places by car tires and prayer. 11,000 euros. 2.2% of the car. The cost of the Maybach's floor mats and the extended paint warranty, roughly, if anyone had cared to do the arithmetic. The request had crossed Brevilieri's desk on a Tuesday, between a reception for an ambassador and a fitting for new vestments. He had not read past the first paragraph. He had summoned no committee, sought no second opinion, suffered no second thought. He had reached for the stamp. He had pressed it once. He had handed the file back to the young priest who had carried it in, a Father Nico Adeyemi, 29 years old, 3 months into his posting, still naive enough to believe that the truth, spoken plainly, would move a powerful man. "Eminence," Father Adeyemi had said, holding the rejected page. "The sisters write that one of the children, a boy, is—" "The budget is the budget," the Cardinal answered, already turning to the mirror, already lifting the new mozzetta to his shoulders. "Charity that bankrupts the church helps no one in the end. Prestige is not vanity, Father. Prestige is diplomacy. A poor church is ignored by kings. Learn the difference before you bring me feelings disguised as invoices." That was the whole of it. 1 sentence. 1 stamp. 1 young priest standing in a corridor with a page in his hand and a feeling in his chest he did not yet have the rank to act on. The machine of the Vatican closed over the moment, the way still water closes over a dropped stone. The car was logged in the fleet registry. The request was archived under a reference number. The morning continued. Bells rang. Coffee was poured into cups older than most nations. And everyone who knew of the rejection assumed that nothing would come of it, because in their long experience, nothing ever did. They were wrong, and they were wrong because of a coincidence so small it would never appear in any report. Father Adeyemi, not yet ready to file the page, had carried it with him across the courtyard, and had passed, head down, a man walking alone in white. By mid-morning, the grey envelope and the rejected request had both reached a 3rd desk, the only desk in the building that stood higher than the Cardinal's. And the man behind it did not summon anyone. He did not raise his voice. He did not order the file reviewed, or the Cardinal cautioned, or a memorandum drafted. He read it twice. He set the 2 pages flat against the wood and smoothed them with the side of his hand. He looked out the window, down at the black car sitting in the courtyard like a wound that would not close. And then Pope Leo XIV began, without a word to anyone, to wait for nightfall. He had seen the car 3 days before, and he had not known whose it was. He had been crossing the courtyard on foot, as he insisted on doing despite the protests of men whose job was to worry, and the machine had sat there gleaming in a slant of morning light, obscene in the way that only beautiful things in the wrong place can be. He had stopped. He had asked a Swiss guard, a boy of 22 named Reto, whose car it was. The guard had hesitated, then told him. The Pope had said nothing, and walked on, and the not saying had cost him more than anyone watching the small white figure cross the stones could have begun to guess. Now, at his desk in the lamplight, he read the file the way a man reads the autopsy of someone he had loved and failed. He made himself read all of it, not the summary at the front. The pages underneath, the ones written by hand, the ones no committee had retyped. That the clinic stood in a settlement they called Campo dei Ferri, the field of irons, a slope of tin and tarpaulin and reclaimed brick on the edge of a city the guidebooks did not photograph. That the road in became a track, and the track became ruts, and the ruts became nothing at all in the rainy season. That the clinic's roof had 3 holes, and that the sisters had marked their positions with buckets, and that the buckets had names because the children had named them. That the medical refrigerator had died in the 2nd week of August, and that with it had died 4 vials of a clotting agent that a 4-year-old named Matteo Salas needed every 14 days, or his joints would fill silently with blood. That since August he had breathed through an oxygen line rigged to a hand pump, a black rubber bulb meant for an aquarium, and that 2 volunteers took turns at the pump through the night, and that on the worst nights they counted his breaths out loud, into the dark, so they would not fall asleep at the handle. That the woman who ran the place had not drawn a salary in 19 years. That she mended the children's shoes herself, after midnight, with a curved upholstery needle and a spool of waxed thread, because she had once been a child who had no shoes at all, and remembered exactly what the cold felt like coming up through a hole in a sole, and had decided, as a girl, that no child she could reach would ever learn that particular arithmetic of winter. That her name was Sister Teresa Ferrante. The Pope read the name and felt something turn over in the room that had nothing to do with the file in his hands. He did not understand it. He set the page down, the way you set down a word in a language you have not spoken since childhood and did not know you still carried. He looked again at the procurement order, at the green ink, at the single justifying sentence about kings and prestige, and he understood with the cold clarity that had frightened Cardinal since the day of his election that a letter would change nothing. A reprimand would be survived. Breviglieri had survived 4 popes, 2 financial scandals, and a heart attack he had hidden for a week to avoid the appearance of weakness. He would nod. He would apologize beautifully in 3 languages. He would buy a smaller car next time and let himself be photographed beside it, and he would call that humility, and the children of Campo dei Ferri would still be counting breaths in the dark. So Leo XIV did not write a letter. He waited until the corridors emptied, until the last secretary had gone, until the palace settled into the particular silence of ancient stone at night. He took from a locked drawer a telephone that was not the official one, the one with the number that fewer than 10 people on earth possessed. And he called a man he had met exactly once, at a charity gala in Geneva, and had disliked on sound theological principle, a shipping billionaire named Halvard Kerno, who collected armored cars the way other men collect postage stamps, and who had, on 3 separate occasions, through 3 separate intermediaries, made an offer for precisely this make and model. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. The Pope did not bargain. When Cardinal, out of reflex, named a lower figure, Leo refused it and named instead the exact sum the church had paid, down to the dollar, and would not move from it. Because the point was not a sale. The point was that the number had to cross over whole. $500,000 of vanity had to become $500,000 of something else, without a single coin lost in the translation, or the arithmetic of the thing would fail. Cardinal, who had not become a billionaire by misreading men, understood that he was being permitted to buy something more valuable than a car, and agreed, and said only, before he hung up, "You are a stranger man than they told me." The Pope took it as the compliment it half was. Before midnight, a wire cleared. $500,000 left an account stamped prestige and diplomatic standing, and landed, in a single transfer, in the operating account of a clinic with 3 named buckets under 3 holes in its roof. Under cover of the same darkness, the black Maybach was driven out through the service gate on the Via del Pellegrino by one of Cardinal's drivers, who wore gloves and asked no questions. And a different vehicle was driven in to take its exact place on the painted rectangle that bore the Cardinal's name. Pope Leo XIV wrote one short note by hand, in black ink, and folded it once, and left it on the dashboard. Then, on a separate sheet, he wrote a list. It was a short list. It had one name at the top. The name was Aldo Breviglieri. The Cardinal came down to the courtyard at 8:30, in full red, his ring catching the light, expecting his car. What stood on the painted rectangle that bore his name was a 14-year-old Fiat Panda, the color of weak tea, rust blooming across the left wheel arch like a stain that had spread beneath the skin and surfaced. One hubcap was gone entirely. The wing mirror on the passenger side was held to the door with 2 wraps of gray tape, gone brittle at the edges. On the dashboard, square in the center, sat a single folded note. He read it standing in the open door, and the color left his face faster than the words alone could have managed. He did not walk to the papal study. He went as fast as a man of his bulk and rank can go without being seen to run, his cassock gathered in one fist, and he came through the door without knocking, and he put the note down on the desk with a flat hand, and he demanded to know what had been done with his car, and on whose authority, and whether the Holy Father had any conception of how this would appear to the diplomatic corps. Pope Leo XIV let him finish. He let the silence afterward run a beat too long. Then he slid 2 pages across the desk. The first was the gray letter, the 4 lines, the careful looping hand. The second was a bank confirmation, a single transfer, $500,000, time-stamped at 11 minutes before midnight. "You reported," the Pope said, "that the funds were unavailable." His voice did not rise. It was the quietest thing in the room, quieter than the clock, and somehow it filled all of it. "I found them. They were in your garage." The Cardinal's mouth opened. Whatever defense he had carried up the stairs, whatever sentence about prestige and kings and the dignity of the office, died somewhere between his chest and his teeth, and did not come out into the air. The Pope stood. He took from the desk a single key on a loop of frayed string, the key to the rust-stained Panda, and he held it out across the space between them. "You'll drive," he said. "I'll show you where it went." They drove for most of the day. The Cardinal in red hunched over a wheel that pulled to the left behind a wing mirror held on with tape. The Pope beside him in the passenger seat, saying almost nothing, one hand flat on his knee. The little engine strained on the hills, and the heater did not work, and somewhere past the second hour, the Cardinal stopped checking his reflection in the cracked mirror, because there was no longer any version of himself there that he wished to see. Campo dei Ferri did not announce itself. It began where the asphalt gave up. First, the road got worse, and then there was no road, only the ruts from the file, and then a smell that no amount of prestige had ever prepared him to breathe, wood smoke and sewage and wet ash, and then, suddenly, on both sides of the car, the children. A truck was already there. The Cardinal saw it before he understood it. Men in work clothes were unloading sacks of rice stamped with the relief agency's blue cross, and crates of powdered milk and a white medical refrigerator still sealed in its factory plastic, and a green oxygen concentrator the size of a suitcase, mains powered, humming already from a generator someone had wired in that morning. On the side of the truck, the same children who had counted breaths in the dark 3 nights before now stood barefoot in the dust, watching their own lives change in real time, paid for, though not one of them knew it, by the leather seat the Cardinal had sat in at 7 o'clock that same morning. He got out of the car because the Pope got out. He had no will of his own left to do otherwise. He stood in the doorway of a long tin ward, and the light inside was the grey-white of a single working bulb, and the floor was poured concrete still dark with the day's mopping, and the smell was disinfectant, laid thin over something older. There were cots along both walls. On the nearest one, a small boy lay with a clear line at his nose that ran for the first time in 2 months, not to a black rubber bulb, but to a machine that breathed for him without a human hand. And then a woman straightened up from the boy's cot and turned around. She was old and small as a child herself, and her habit was patched at both elbows with cloth that did not quite match. Where another cardinal might have worn a jeweled cross, she had pinned to the breast of her habit a curved upholstery needle, threaded, ready, because a child's shoe always needed mending, and a needle is easier to find when it lives over the heart. She looked at the man in red for a long moment. And the thing that crossed her face was not awe, and it was not the practiced deference that every other face had shown him for 30 years. It was the soft, unbearable tenderness of a person who has just found something she had made herself stop looking for, so as not to grieve it any longer. "Aldo," she said. Only that. Only the name. It was the name signed at the bottom of the letter he had stamped unread. It was the name no one in Rome had ever been permitted to know, the name he had shed like a coat at a seminary door. It had belonged to a foundling left at an orphanage gate on the coldest night of a winter 49 years gone, wrapped in newspaper, blue at the lips, and to the young nun who had taken that bundle inside and warmed his feet against her own body, and who, when the child's shoes wore through that first spring, had given him hers, and gone barefoot herself across a stone yard until the diocese sent more. She had taught 3,000 children to write. One of them had grown and climbed and changed his name and traded his origin for green ink and a German car, and had stamped her plea for 11,000 euros funds unavailable without reading the hand that had first guided his own. The Cardinal did not give a speech. He made a sound that was not a word, a sound torn out of a much younger throat than his, and his knees simply went out from under him, and he came down onto the wet concrete floor of a clinic he had refused to save. In front of the children he had come within days of letting die in the dark, and he wept the way a man weeps only once, when the lie he has lived inside his entire life finally caves in on top of him, and there is nothing left holding up the ceiling. Sister Teresa Ferrante crossed the room toward him with the small, careful steps of the old. She did not lift him up. She did not condemn him. She did not say that she had prayed for him, though she had every night for 40 years by a name no one else remembered. She put her hand on his bowed head, the way she had when he was 4 years old and feverish and afraid of the dark, and she said the only words spoken in that whole long day that were shorter than his silence. "You came back." The story did not end that morning, and it would be a lie shaped like a fairy tale to pretend that it did. The refrigerator was uncrated and running before dark, and the clotting agent that Matteo Salas needed was inside it by the following week, in a drawer with his name taped to the front, spelled the way his mother had spelled it before she died. The oxygen concentrator hummed through the nights, and the 2 volunteers who had worked the hand pump slept, for the first time in months, a whole night each and stopped counting breaths out loud, and one of them wept at the strangeness of the silence. The 3 holes in the roof were patched before the rains came. The 3 named buckets were retired. The children kept them anyway, for water fights, which the sisters permitted. $500,000, which had purchased one man's reflection in black paint and bulletproof glass, bought instead a clinic that did not close, a winter that 91 children survived, a refrigerator that hummed in the dark like something alive, and a single drawer with a 4-year-old's name on it. Sister Teresa Ferrante did not draw a salary the following year either, nor the year after. She mended shoes with the same curved needle. When visitors asked her about the Cardinal, she would say only that she had taught him his letters once, a long time ago, and that he had always been a little slow to read the most important ones, and then she would change the subject to the children, because the children were the subject she preferred. And the Cardinal. He did not resign in disgrace because the Pope refused the resignation, and a refused resignation is a far heavier sentence than a granted one. He was sent back to Campo dei Ferri, not as a visitor, not as a benefactor with a camera behind him, but to live. He gave up the apartment in Rome. He kept no car. He carried water up the slope in 2 plastic jugs each morning, and learned, at 61, with blistered hands, how to seal a tin roof against the rain. In the breast of his cassock, where the green ink and the gold pen used to live, he now kept a single folded page, soft as cloth from being opened and closed 1,000 times, the 4-line letter he had once stamped unread. He read it every morning before the children woke. He had a great deal of time now to learn to read the important ones. This is where the story passes out of that tin ward, and out of Rome, and into your hands. Because the engine that nearly killed those 91 children was not greed. Greed is loud and obvious, and easy to point at from a distance. The engine was quieter than that. It was a stamp pressed once by a man who would not look up from the mirror. It was a budget that was always, so conveniently, a budget. It was the small gray decision made by someone warm and comfortable and certain that the suffering of people he could not see was a line item, and that a line item can always wait. That decision is being made somewhere in the world right now, tonight, as you watch this. And the only force that has ever reliably stopped it is the refusal of ordinary people to look away. So if Sister Teresa's curved needle moved something in you, leave a like. Not for this channel. For her, and for the 19 unpaid years she spent mending shoes after midnight for children the powerful had filed under unavailable. If you believe the unseen are worth seeing, subscribe. Not for us, and not for the number. Become one more person in a growing room of people who refuse to walk past, who refuse to inherit the comfortable silence that lets the stamp come down on a child's name. And if there is someone in your life who keeps saying that the budget is the budget, who says it about human beings the way other people say it about furniture, send them this. Send it with no message. Just the link. Let the children count their own breaths now, in their own voices, in the daylight. Because somewhere tonight there is a gate, and a winter, and a child wrapped in newspaper, with no shoes and blue at the lips, and a stamp hovering over a plea that no one important has read. They are not waiting for a pope. They are not waiting for a billionaire with a fleet of armored cars. They are waiting for the one person who finally looks up. This time, let it be you.